Picture yourself strolling through a bustling medieval marketplace, the air thick with the scent of baking bread and the sounds of merchants haggling. You feel the uneven cobblestones beneath your feet, see the towering cathedrals and fortified walls that define the city's skyline. But what if I told you that the real story of medieval power wasn't happening up here in the sunlight, but deep below your feet in a hidden world of tunnels, chambers, and secret passages? This is the city beneath the city, a vast labyrinthine network that determined the fate of empires, safeguarded treasures, and enabled everything from espionage to economic control. While kings built castles and cathedrals to display their might, the true engines of their power operated in the darkness below, shaping politics, survival, and daily life in ways that still influence us today. We often imagine the Middle Ages as a time of surface-level struggles, knights in armor, grand battles, and towering stone structures. But the real marvels of medieval ingenuity were concealed underground, where engineers, planners, and visionaries carved out spaces that provided defense during sieges, stored essential resources through famines, and even housed clandestine meetings that changed the course of history. From the crypts of great cathedrals where saints' relics drew pilgrims and wealth, to the aqueducts and cisterns that quenched a city's thirst during droughts, these subterranean structures were the unsung heroes of an era defined by uncertainty. They weren't just functional, they were psychological tools, symbols of a duality where visible grandeur above ground was supported by concealed strength below. In this video, we're going to descend together into that hidden world. We'll explore how darkness literally held the keys to light above ground, uncovering the secrets of escape routes that saved monarchs, underground markets that fueled economies, and sacred spaces that preserved faith and culture against all odds. This isn't just a story about architecture or history, it's about human resilience, the timeless drive to innovate and survive against overwhelming odds. So join me on this journey beneath the surface as we discover how these incredible networks kept medieval power not just alive but thriving, and how their legacy continues to echo in the foundations of our modern world. To understand why medieval societies became so adept at building downward, we need to step back even further in time. The drive to go underground is one of humanity's oldest stories, and medieval engineers were simply building upon a foundation laid by ancient masters. The Romans, in particular, were unparalleled subterranean innovators. They constructed extensive networks known as cryptoporticus semi-subterranean vaulted passageways that served as cool, shaded promenades for the elite, storage galleries for goods, and even structural foundations to level out buildings on hilly terrain. This Roman engineering genius didn't just vanish with the empire. Its knowledge seeped into the medieval world, a ghost in the architectural machine. But the roots go deeper still, to civilizations like the Etruscans, who carved entire cities of the dead necropolises out of soft volcanic tufa rock, creating elaborate tombs that mirrored their homes above ground. For them, the underground was a sacred bridge to the afterlife. Medieval Europe inherited this legacy of digging, but it was a new set of desperate pressures that turned it from an occasional practice into an urban necessity. Imagine a typical medieval city, walls constricting its growth, streets choked with people and animals, and the constant, looming threat of invasion, famine, or plague. With real estate at a premium and danger ever present, the only direction left to expand was down. This wasn't a choice made for luxury, it was a matter of sheer survival. So they began to dig, often repurposing what nature had already provided. The quarry sites that supplied the stone for their magnificent cathedrals and castles were later hollowed out into vast cellars and living spaces. Natural cave systems, like those beneath Naples, were expanded into labyrinthine neighborhoods that could shelter thousands during a siege. This gave rise to a powerful duality that became central to medieval power structures. A king or a bishop could display their wealth and piety with a soaring cathedral, a visible symbol of their authority for all to see. But that very same building was often underpinned by a hidden world, a crypt holding the relics of a saint that drew pilgrims and their wealth, or a secret passage allowing for a discreet escape if the city gates were breached. The grandeur above was literally supported by the utilitarian strength below. This hidden infrastructure became the bedrock of medieval resilience, a silent partner in the drama of history that unfolded on the surface. Cities like Edinburgh built downward into the very rock of their castle hill, creating a multi-level urban fabric where life existed on multiple planes. Paris grew its roots deep into ancient limestone quarries that would later become the infamous catacombs. This foundational period set the stage for everything that was to come, a sophisticated, layered approach to urban life where power wasn't just about what you could see, but also about what you knew was hidden, waiting in the dark. But these defensive tunnels were far more than just escape hatches. They were active instruments of warfare. Imagine the terror of an invading force, confident they have a castle surrounded, only to have soldiers erupt from a hidden entrance behind their own lines. This was the terrifying reality made possible by sally ports, discreetly engineered doorways concealed by vegetation or clever masonry. A garrison, presumed to be trapped and starving, could launch a devastating counterattack from an utterly unexpected direction, sowing chaos and breaking a siege momentum. The psychological impact was immense. It transformed a castle from a static fortress into a seemingly living entity that could strike back from anywhere, even from the ground beneath the attacker's feet. The most clandestine and brutal form of underground combat, however, was the deadly game of countermining. When besiegers could not break the walls above, they would dig beneath them. Teams of sappers would tunnel under fortifications to weaken their foundations, creating a chamber that would be filled with combustible material and set alight, collapsing the wall above. To counter this, defenders dug their own labyrinth of listening tunnels. In the profound silence underground, soldiers would literally press their ears to the earth, listening for the faintest scrape of a pickaxe or murmur of voices. Once an enemy tunnel was detected, the defenders would dig furiously to intercept it. The ensuing clashes in these narrow, pitch-black passages were nightmares of close-quarters combat, a brutal, claustrophobic struggle in the dirt where victory meant surviving to see the light of day. This hidden architecture of defense was also meticulously designed to maximize the advantage for those who knew its secrets. Staircases would spiral in a direction that forced right-handed attackers ascending them to struggle with their sword arms against a central column, while defenders descending had full freedom of movement. Tiny arrow slits, invisible from the outside, allowed archers to cover every approach to a hidden entrance, and perhaps most chillingly, many of these passages were booby-trapped. Pivoting stones could give way underfoot, dropping an intruder into an oubliette, a forgotten pit from which there was no escape. False floors concealed pits lined with sharpened stakes. These were not just tunnels, they were carefully crafted death traps that turned the very earth against any invader foolish enough to venture into the darkness. The true genius of these subterranean fortresses was their dual nature. While they were instruments of immense violence and fear, their very existence also created spaces of refuge and resilience. The same tunnels that housed soldiers for a surprise attack could also shelter the castle's non-combatants, the cooks, the children, the scribes during the worst bombardment. Deep underground, behind tons of stone and earth, they were safe from catapults and fire arrows. Cool, constant temperatures in these lower levels preserved food and water supplies, allowing a garrison to outlast a siege that might last for months. This duality, the capacity for both aggressive defense and sustained survival, is what made the underground the ultimate symbol of medieval power. A ruler who could command the depths below could confidently command the world above, their authority secured not just by towering walls, but by the unseen, unassailable labyrinth that lay beneath them. And so, while these hidden passages secured military victory, they also safeguarded the very lifeblood of a city, its wealth and its food. Imagine the precariousness of medieval life, where a single bad harvest could mean starvation, or a stray spark could ignite a fire that would consume a season's worth of grain in a matter of hours. In a world without insurance, without refrigeration, and with constant threats from both man and nature, security meant one thing: putting your most valuable assets deep underground. The cellars and vaults beneath a lord's castle or a merchant's guild hall were not mere storage rooms. They were fortified economic engines, the silent, stable foundation upon which the noisy, chaotic marketplace above could even exist. This was a matter of environmental control as much as security. The earth itself provided a naturally regulated climate, a constant cool temperature and darkness that was perfect for preserving perishable goods. In the Italian hilltop city of Orvieto, builders carved vast chambers directly into the soft volcanic tufa rock. These weren't just random caves, they were meticulously designed cantinas, complete with ventilation shafts and drainage channels, where the city's prized olive oil and wine could be kept at perfect condition for years, safe from the scorching summer heat and the freezing winter cold. The value of these commodities wasn't just in their taste, they were a form of liquid wealth, a currency that could be traded, taxed, and used to sustain the population through lean times. Control over these underground stores meant control over the city's economic stability. This concept reached its zenith in places like Cappadocia, in modern-day Turkey. There, entire communities carved out not just homes and churches, but enormous, multi-level underground cities like Derinkuyu, which descended hundreds of feet into the earth. Within these labyrinthine depths, they constructed vast granaries, huge, circular pits carved into the floor, designed to hold enough wheat, barley, and legumes to feed thousands of people for months on end. During times of invasion or political unrest, the entire population could retreat below, sealing the massive stone doors behind them, and live off these hidden reserves until the danger above had passed. This wasn't just storage, it was a complete strategy for societal resilience, a buried pantry that guaranteed a community's survival against all odds. But the underground economy wasn't solely about defense and preservation. It was also a hotbed of covert commerce and evasion. For the merchant elite, secrecy was just as valuable as security. A network of tunnels connecting a wealthy trader's home to the town's docks or the central marketplace was like a private, tax-free highway. Precious spices, bolts of silk, or imported metals could be moved directly from ship to cellar, or from workshop to client, completely bypassing the crowded, watched streets where officials collected tolls and tariffs. This shadow economy allowed merchants to amass enormous fortunes away from the greedy eyes of both rivals and the crown, consolidating their influence and power in the process. The underground, therefore, became a space where the rules of the surface world could be bent or broken entirely, all in the silent, profitable pursuit of commerce. This descent into the earth was never solely about defense or commerce. For countless medieval people, it was also a journey toward the divine. While the powerful built tunnels for protection and profit, the faithful dug for an entirely different reason: to touch the sacred, to commune with the dead, and in times of terror, to preserve their very right to pray. The underground became a unique spiritual landscape, a place where the boundaries between heaven and earth, life and death, seemed to grow thin. In the profound silence and darkness below, they found not emptiness but a powerful presence. Nowhere was this connection more vividly displayed than in the crypts of Europe's great cathedrals. Beneath the soaring arches and stained glass windows of places like Chartres or Canterbury lay another world entirely, a low-ceilinged, dimly lit realm of stone and shadow. This was the resting place of saints, the heart of the cathedral's spiritual and economic power. Pilgrims would travel for weeks, sometimes months, for the chance to descend a narrow staircase and glimpse a reliquary said to contain the bone of a martyr or a fragment of the true cross. This act of veneration wasn't just personal piety, it was a transaction that fueled the medieval economy. The donations these pilgrims left behind funded the very construction of the magnificent structures above, cementing the church's immense temporal authority. The grandeur of the surface cathedral was quite literally built upon the sacred bones hidden in the crypt below. In crowded cities, the practical need for burial space dovetailed perfectly with spiritual beliefs. The catacombs of Rome, though ancient, continued to be used and expanded in the medieval period, while new networks like those in Paris offered a solution to overflowing cemeteries. But these were far more than just efficient repositories for the dead. The very act of placing bodies underground was a powerful physical metaphor for the Christian belief in burial and resurrection, a symbolic planting of the faithful like seeds, waiting to bloom again on the day of judgment. Walking through these tunnels, surrounded by the neatly stacked remains of generations, was a memento mori, a stark and unforgettable reminder of the transience of earthly life and the promise of what was to come. For those outside the mainstream of medieval Christianity, however, the underground served a more urgent and dangerous purpose. It was a sanctuary for the persecuted. When heresy hunts targeted groups like the Cathars in southern France, their followers were forced to vanish from sight. They found refuge in hidden caves and secret chambers in the remote countryside, where they could continue their rituals and pass on their teachings away from the watchful eyes of the Inquisition. Similarly, in Spain and elsewhere in Europe, Jewish communities facing pogroms and expulsion often built secret synagogues in the basements of their homes or in concealed rooms accessible only through disguised entrances. In these hidden spaces, they could observe the Sabbath, teach their children, and maintain their cultural identity under the most oppressive conditions. This transformative power of the underground to hide, to protect, and to sanctify turned these spaces into more than just architectural features. They became vessels for the most profound human emotions: faith, fear, hope, and resilience. They stored the physical remains of the venerated dead, but they also safeguarded the living spirit of communities under threat. In the darkness, people preserved not just bones but identity, not just rituals but resistance. The sacred underground was a testament to the idea that some of the most powerful and enduring forms of strength are those that remain unseen, nurturing hope and faith in the deepest shadows until they can once again emerge into the light. Yet this mastery over water was about far more than just survival. It was a profound expression of political power. In an era where a city's loyalty could be swayed by a single dry well, the authority to provide or withhold water was a tool of control as potent as any army. The intricate underground networks were not built for the benefit of all equally. They were carefully designed to reinforce the existing social order. Elites ensured that their private palaces and gardens had direct, privileged access to the cleanest and most reliable supplies, often through hidden inlet pipes that bypassed the public system entirely. In times of shortage or siege, these secret connections meant the difference between comfort and catastrophe for the ruling class, while the general populace might face strict rationing. This hydraulic hierarchy was a silent, constant reminder of who truly held power, the ones who controlled the flow of life itself. The technological brilliance behind these systems is staggering when you consider the tools available. Medieval engineers, working without modern surveying equipment, somehow managed to chart courses for tunnels that ran for miles with only the slightest, precise gradient to maintain water flow. In Siena, the legendary Bettini tunnels, whose name comes from the Italian word for barrel due to their rounded shape, were dug through rock and soil over centuries. The maintainers of these tunnels, known as the Bontanini, were revered figures, descending into the darkness with little more than picks, lamps, and an intimate knowledge of the earth to clean, repair, and expand the network that was the city's lifeline. Their work was so vital that they were granted special legal protections and privileges, a testament to how highly this subterranean knowledge was valued. Perhaps the most elegant solution to water scarcity came from the Islamic world with the introduction of the qanat. This was not merely a tunnel, but an entire system of sustainable water management perfected in Persia and spread across the medieval world, including into Islamic Spain. A qanat began with a mother well tapped into a distant groundwater source, often at the foot of a mountain. From there, skilled diggers would chart a gently sloping underground channel all the way to the surface destination, ventilated by a regular series of vertical shafts. The genius of the qanat was that it transported water using nothing but gravity, preventing evaporation loss in arid climates and delivering a cool, clean supply directly to the heart of a city or the fields of an oasis. This ancient technology turned some of the most inhospitable landscapes into centers of civilization and agriculture, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of hydrology that would not be matched in the West for centuries. Beyond the grand aqueducts and cisterns, the everyday reality of water access played out in the shared spaces of the city. Public fountains, fed by these hidden networks, became bustling social hubs where news was exchanged, gossip was shared, and community ties were strengthened. The sound of flowing water was the sound of urban life itself. However, the distribution was never perfectly even, and competition between neighborhoods or powerful families over water rights could lead to bitter disputes, sometimes even violence. The very location of a fountain or a well could define the status of a city quarter, making the engineers and planners who decided its placement figures of immense, if indirect, influence. By carefully managing this distribution by ensuring a fair, or sometimes strategically unfair, allocation of water, medieval governments could present themselves as benevolent providers, thereby legitimizing their rule and maintaining civic peace. Ultimately, these hidden hydraulic achievements represent one of the Middle Ages' greatest legacies, the ability to harness the environment for the stability of society. The cool, dark silence of a cistern or the steady, unseen flow of a qanat held more power than any crown jewel. They were the reason a city could withstand a prolonged siege, why a desert could bloom, and why a government could command the loyalty of its people. Mastery over water was the ultimate demonstration of a ruler's power, because it proved they could not only defend against human enemies, but could also tame nature itself to provide for their people's most fundamental need. This silent, flowing network beneath the streets was the true circulatory system of the medieval city, and those who controlled its pulse held the keys to lasting power. While kings and bishops waged their wars of faith and steel above ground, a far more subtle and silent battle was being fought in the shadows beneath their feet. In the high-stakes game of medieval politics, information was the ultimate currency, and the underground provided the perfect, unseen highway for its exchange. This covert world transformed the very concept of communication, allowing secrets to flow through the darkness like water through a buried aqueduct, completely invisible to the world above. The rulers who mastered this hidden network held an advantage that was both profound and terrifying. They could hear everything while revealing nothing. Consider the sheer logistical brilliance of a secret tunnel connecting a ruler's private chambers to a distant monastery or a loyal supporter's home. A courier carrying a sensitive treaty draft or the plans for a preemptive strike didn't need to brave the crowded, watchful streets where foreign agents might lurk. Instead, they could descend into the silence, moving with utter discretion from one secure location to another. The tunnels beneath the Hampton Court Palace in England are a perfect example. They allowed Henry VIII's most trusted advisors to come and go without ever being observed, enabling the intricate plotting that defined his tumultuous reign. This wasn't just a convenience, it was a strategic imperative. In an era where a single intercepted message could spark a rebellion or betray an army's position, the ability to communicate in absolute secrecy was more valuable than a regiment of knights. Some of these subterranean passages were engineered with a sophistication that feels almost modern. Beyond simple concealment, they were designed to actively facilitate confidential discussion. Certain vaulted tunnels and small, hidden chambers were constructed as whispering galleries, architectural marvels where sound behaved in strange and useful ways. Through the careful shaping of curved stone walls, a conspirator standing in one specific spot could speak in the lowest murmur and be heard with perfect clarity by someone standing dozens of feet away at another focal point, while anyone else in the room would hear only a faint, unintelligible echo. This allowed for the safest possible exchange of secrets, ensuring that even within a supposedly secure space, the most dangerous words could be uttered without fear of eavesdropping. The most famous hub of this clandestine activity was without a doubt the Vatican. For centuries, a complex and ever-evolving web of hidden passageways, known as the Passetto di Borgo, snaked through the fortress like walls of the Holy See. This network served every possible purpose of power. It was an escape route for popes in mortal danger, most famously allowing Clement VII to flee to the safety of Castel Sant'Angelo during the catastrophic sack of Rome in 1527. It was also an intelligence-gathering apparatus, a means for spies to move undetected, and a channel for summoning allies without alerting enemies. The very existence of these passages created an aura of omniscience around the papacy. One could never be sure who might be listening from behind a seemingly solid wall, or which confessional might be a disguised door. This atmosphere of pervasive, unseen observation was a psychological tool as powerful as any physical threat. This hidden infrastructure effectively turned entire cities into vast, three-dimensional chessboards. Every move made in the sunlight of the court had a corresponding, unseen maneuver in the darkness below. An ambassador's public slight might be answered by a secret message delivered through a tunnel, threatening economic ruin. A nobleman's plot to overthrow his lord could be uncovered because a spy had overheard the conspiracy in an underground chamber. The sound carried along a stone conduit meant for water but used for words. Victory in these games of power was no longer solely determined by the strength of your army or the size of your treasury, but by the depth of your intelligence and the sophistication of your hidden channels. The true masters of the medieval world understood that power was not just about controlling what was seen, but also about commanding the immense, silent potential of everything that remained unseen. Yet for all the shadowy intrigue of spies and rulers, the vast majority of underground life was not about high-stakes secrets or sacred relics. It was about the raw, pragmatic business of daily survival. While the elite engineered tunnels for escape and control, ordinary people were carving out an existence in the earth out of sheer necessity, transforming the very rock beneath the city into a vibrant, multi-layered world of work, home, and community. This was the underground not as a strategic asset, but as a lived reality, a parallel society where the rhythms of life were dictated by the constant temperature of the stone and the faint light from a single oil lamp. In places like Matera in southern Italy, this reality was etched into the landscape itself. The Sassi districts, literally the stones, were not a neighborhood built with materials from the earth, but one built within the earth. For generations, families lived in homes that were caves, their front walls the only man-made construction. Step inside one of these dwellings and you'd find a multi-purpose space where life unfolded in a single room. A family might sleep in an alcove carved into the back, while the center area served as a kitchen, the heat from the cooking fire helping to warm the entire chamber in winter. Another niche might house the family's livestock, a donkey or a few goats, their body heat providing additional warmth, their presence a valuable asset. Storage pits were dug directly into the floor, keeping cheese, wine, and grains cool and fresh. This wasn't a primitive way of life, it was a brilliantly adapted one, using the Earth's natural insulation to create a comfortable home that stayed cool in the blistering summer heat and warm during the chilly winters, all without any need for advanced technology. This practical ingenuity extended powerfully into the world of work. Many medieval trades were, by their nature, noisy, smelly, or dangerously flammable, making them deeply unpopular neighbors in the crowded, wooden streets of a surface city. The solution was to move the workshop underground. Tanners, who needed large vats of urine and animal feces to cure hides, could conduct their malodorous business in a cellar containing the overwhelming stench. Brewers and bakers, whose large ovens and fires posed a constant risk of conflagration, could build their kilns safely underground, where a stray spark was less likely to burn down the entire city. The constant, cool temperature of these subterranean spaces was also ideal for fermentation, making them perfect for brewing beer or aging cheese. In this way, the underground became the city's industrial zone, a place where the essential but undesirable industries could thrive without causing offense or endangering the community above. But these spaces were far more than just practical solutions. They became the heart of a robust social world that often operated just beyond the reach of official authority. A cellar tavern tucked away beneath a butcher's shop became a place where guild members could meet to discuss wages and working conditions away from the ears of their masters. In these dimly lit, smoky rooms, lit by rushlights and filled with the smell of ale, the seeds of early labor movements were sometimes sown. These hidden corners also offered refuge to those on the margins of society. A fugitive fleeing unjust authority, a couple conducting a forbidden romance, or a group practicing a faith that was out of favor, all could find a temporary haven in the warren of cellars and abandoned tunnels that wormed through the city's foundations. This created a unique social dynamic. Life underground fostered incredibly tight-knit communities bound by shared space and mutual dependence. Neighbors were connected not just by streets, but by the very rock they shared, their lives literally intertwined. They developed their own unwritten rules, their own methods of conflict resolution, and their own unique traditions that were passed down through generations. Folk songs, stories, and recipes survived in these isolated communities long after they had been forgotten on the surface, preserved in the cultural time capsule of the underground. This parallel society, born from practicality, became a bastion of resilience and cultural identity, a world where the common people could exercise a degree of control and self-determination that was often denied to them in the sunlit world of laws and lords. It was a testament to the human spirit's ability to not just endure, but to build a rich, complex community life in the most unlikely of places, all in the shadows beneath the feet of the powerful. This sophisticated integration of above and below ground was no accident. It was the result of deliberate, forward-thinking urban design that saw the city not as a flat plain, but as a three-dimensional entity. Medieval planners understood that a city's strength and functionality depended as much on its hidden veins and arteries as it did on its visible skin and bones. The layout of a main street, for instance, was often determined by the subterranean utility it could provide access to. A wide thoroughfare might be positioned directly above a key aqueduct tunnel, allowing for relatively easy excavation and maintenance when repairs were needed. Conversely, a narrow, winding alleyway might be designed to conceal the entrance to a network of cellars used for storing a town's most valuable commodities, its confusing layout acting as a natural deterrent to thieves. Public buildings were the nerve centers of this dual-layer strategy. A town hall was far more than a seat of government. It was a gateway to the city's underworld. Its cavernous basement typically served as the main municipal storage for grain reserves, vital legal documents locked in heavy chests, and even the town's treasury. But more importantly, it was often the central node in a web of discrete passages. A hidden staircase behind a panel in the council chamber could allow city leaders to flee to a safe house during a riot. A tunnel from the basement might connect directly to the nearby church, enabling the quick and secure movement of priests or relics in times of danger, or to the docks, providing a covert route for receiving sensitive shipments. This meant that the heart of civic power was not just symbolically protected by stone walls, but physically secured by multiple, unseen escape and supply routes. Nowhere is this layered urban planning more vividly preserved than in Edinburgh, Scotland. The city's famous closes and wynds, those narrow, steep alleys branching off the Royal Mile, were not mere architectural quirks. They were a brilliant solution to explosive population growth confined by geography and defensive walls. As the city became more crowded, the only way to build was up and down. Merchants and tenement owners constructed towering buildings, sometimes reaching 10 or 12 stories high, which were among the tallest in the world for their time. But they also built down deep into the bedrock of the volcanic ridge. The lower levels of these structures, often dug out to create a series of vaulted chambers, became the engine room of the city above. This is where the servants lived, where the workshops of noisy, smelly trades like tanning and butchering were located, and where goods were stored. The very poorest residents might live in these damp, dark cellars, while the wealthy enjoyed the sunlight and views in the upper apartments. This vertical segregation by class was a direct and intentional result of urban planning, using the underground to manage social order and economic function by literally putting the messy, essential work of the city out of sight, yet keeping it immediately accessible. This approach created a remarkably durable and flexible urban infrastructure. A city that could expand vertically downward was a city that could adapt. When surface buildings burned down, a common tragedy in medieval wooden cities, the stone cellars and tunnels often survived, providing a ready-made foundation for reconstruction. As new technologies emerged, these existing subterranean spaces could be repurposed. An old grain storage cellar might be converted into a brewery, its constant cool temperature proving perfect for fermenting ale. A disused escape tunnel might become a root vegetable warehouse for a local grocer. This flexibility meant that the city's hidden footprint could evolve over centuries, constantly being updated and reused rather than being abandoned. It was a sustainable model of urban development long before the concept even had a name. The true testament to medieval ingenuity is that this hidden infrastructure wasn't a separate, secret world. It was woven into the daily experience of every citizen, even if they were unaware of its full extent. The weight of a heavy cart rumbling over a street might signal that it was passing directly over a shallow tunnel. The peculiar coolness of a certain shop's back room might be due to its shared wall with an ancient, forgotten cistern. The city functioned as a single, integrated organism, its life above sustained by the silent, steady workings below. This deep-rooted design philosophy created urban centers that were incredibly resilient, capable of weathering sieges, fires, plagues, and economic shifts because their strength was not just on the surface, but was buried deep within the very earth they were built upon. But the value of these hidden troves went far beyond the objects themselves. Each rescued manuscript, each safeguarded relic, was a thread in the vast tapestry of cultural memory. When invaders sought to break a people's spirit, they often targeted these symbols of identity, first burning books, smashing statues, desecrating holy sites. To protect these items was to protect the very soul of a community, ensuring that even if cities fell and governments collapsed, the stories, the knowledge, and the beliefs that defined a culture would live on to inspire a future rebirth. The monks who secreted away their illuminated gospels weren't just hiding pages of vellum. They were preserving 1,000 years of theological thought, artistic tradition, and historical record. They were saving the tools that would eventually be used to rebuild their world. This clandestine work of preservation often fell to dedicated networks of individuals who understood the long game of history. In the Islamic Golden Age, as the Mongol armies advanced on Baghdad in the 13th century, a different kind of siege was underway, a race against time to save the immense knowledge contained within the House of Wisdom, the world's greatest library at the time. Scholars and scribes, knowing the city's fate was sealed, didn't just flee. They orchestrated a meticulous evacuation of knowledge. Precious texts on mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy were smuggled out through basements and underground passages, dispersed to smaller, hidden libraries in satellite towns and remote monasteries. This decentralized, underground network of knowledge acted as a backup drive for civilization, ensuring that the Mongol sacking of Baghdad, while a devastating human tragedy, would not erase the scientific and philosophical advancements of centuries. The physical nature of these hiding places often played a crucial role in the survival of these cultural treasures. The constant, cool temperature and stable humidity of deep underground spaces like the Hal Saflieni hypogeum in Malta provided a perfect, natural climate control system. This complex, multi-level labyrinth carved into limestone, originally a burial site, was later used to safeguard ritual objects, sacred texts, and other artifacts during periods of foreign invasion and rule. Sealed away from the fluctuating heat and moisture of the surface, these items were protected from the decay that would have claimed them in a surface-level hiding place. The very earth itself became a conservator, its silent, dark chambers preserving paints on pottery, preventing mold on parchment, and keeping wooden objects from cracking, allowing them to emerge centuries later with their stories still legible. This act of cultural preservation was, in its essence, the ultimate act of defiance and hope. Those who risked their lives to lower a chest of manuscripts into a well or to brick up a chapel alcove filled with sacred art were making a profound wager on the future. They were betting that the darkness and chaos of their present moment was temporary. They were investing in a time they would never see, placing their faith in the hands of generations yet unborn to rediscover this hidden heritage and understand its value. The underground spaces became a kind of time capsule, but not one meant for casual discovery. It was a targeted message of resilience sent to the future, a promise that the light of knowledge, though temporarily hidden, had not been extinguished. This ensured that after the storm of conquest or persecution had passed, the seeds for a renaissance were already waiting, safely germinating in the dark, ready to bloom once more into the light. While the spiritual and the strategic thrived in the darkness, so too did the seeds of scientific inquiry, nurtured in the quiet isolation of the underground. In an age where the boundaries between science, magic, and religion were blurred, and where challenging established doctrines could be perilous, the subterranean world offered a rare and precious commodity for the intellectually curious: privacy. Here, away from the suspicious gaze of the public and the strict oversight of religious authorities, the first tentative steps toward modern medicine and chemistry could be taken in relative safety, transforming damp cellars and forgotten tunnels into the earliest research laboratories. The most famous practitioners of this clandestine science were the alchemists. To the modern mind, their quest to turn base metals into gold seems like fantasy, but their work was grounded in a rigorous, if flawed, experimental process. Their basements and workshops were filled with a fascinating array of equipment: alembics for distillation, crucibles for heating metals, and complex arrays of glassware for capturing vapors and essences. The constant, cool temperature of these underground spaces was not just a comfort, it was a critical variable in their work, allowing for the slow, careful processes of fermentation, crystallization, and sublimation that were essential to their practice. While their ultimate goal of transmutation remained elusive, their methodical experimentation led to countless accidental discoveries. In their search for the philosopher's stone, they instead uncovered new chemical compounds, developed advanced techniques for purifying minerals and acids, and laid the foundational principles for the science of chemistry. Their hidden work, often dismissed as mere mysticism, was in fact a crucial cradle for empirical investigation. This practical understanding of materials found a more immediately beneficial application in the realm of medieval medicine. Physicians and apothecaries knew that the potency of their most valuable remedies, dried herbs, ground roots, complex tinctures, and fermented potions, was fragile. Sunlight, heat, and humidity could degrade these precious commodities, rendering them useless. The solution, once again, was to go underground. The cellars beneath apothecary shops became vast, organized repositories of healing, with shelves of ceramic jars and glass bottles lining the walls, each carefully labeled with its contents. The dark, stable environment acted as a natural preservative, ensuring that a dose of willow bark for pain or a preparation of foxglove for the heart would be as effective months after its creation as it was on the first day. This reliable storage was a cornerstone of public health, allowing medical professionals to build up reserves to treat the sick and injured consistently. Perhaps the most dramatic and consequential use of the underground for medical advancement occurred in the study of human anatomy. For much of the medieval period, the Church forbade the dissection of human corpses, considering it a desecration of God's creation. This created an enormous obstacle for physicians, forcing them to rely on centuries-old texts from Galen that were often based on animal anatomy and were frequently wrong. However, in a few pioneering places, the thirst for knowledge overcame religious prohibition. The medical school in Salerno, one of the most advanced in Europe, is famously rumored to have used tunnels and underground chambers for exactly this purpose. Here, in secret, away from public view, physicians and students could carefully dissect cadavers, often those of executed criminals provided by sympathetic officials. This illicit, hands-on exploration was revolutionary. It allowed them to see with their own eyes the intricate workings of muscles, the branching pathways of nerves, and the precise structure of the human skeleton, correcting ancient errors and building a far more accurate understanding of the body that would directly inform more effective surgical techniques and treatments. This hidden world of science and medicine reveals a fascinating paradox at the heart of the medieval mindset. On the surface, society was often governed by doctrine, superstition, and fear of the unknown. But beneath that surface, in the quiet, purposeful darkness, a different spirit was at work, one of observation, experimentation, and a relentless drive to understand the natural world. The underground provided a sanctuary for this spirit, a place where curiosity could operate without immediate censure. The innovations born in these spaces, from new chemical processes to accurate anatomical charts, slowly percolated upward, eventually helping to dismantle the very superstitions that had forced them into hiding in the first place. It was a powerful demonstration that progress often begins not in the bright light of acceptance, but in the shadows of necessity, where the desire to know is stronger than the fear of what might be found. The terrifying reality of the Black Death presented a crisis unlike any siege. An enemy you could not see, could not fight with sword or boiling oil, was sweeping through cities, striking down rich and poor alike with terrifying speed. In this atmosphere of sheer panic and helplessness, the familiar refuge of the underground took on a new and grimly practical role. While the wealthy might flee to remote country estates, for the vast majority of city dwellers, escape was impossible. Their only option was to adapt, and the spaces beneath their feet became the front line in a desperate battle for survival. Cellars and cool, dark tunnels, once used for storage and trade, were hastily repurposed into isolation wards and quarantine zones. Those showing the first dreaded signs of the plague, the fever, the buboes were often moved below ground, not out of cruelty, but in a frantic attempt to separate the sick from the healthy and slow the relentless spread of the disease. These subterranean spaces, with their limited access points, became a form of biological containment, a stark and heartbreaking measure in the face of an invisible foe. Beyond serving as makeshift hospitals, the underground became a critical logistical hub for managing the crisis. The same vast, temperature-stable cellars that once held barrels of wine and sacks of grain were now stocked with precious medical supplies, bundles of herbs believed to purify the air, vinegar for cleansing, and cloth for bandages. Perhaps most somberly, they also served as temporary mortuaries. With death rates soaring and gravediggers themselves falling victim, the traditional system of burial completely broke down. To manage the overwhelming number of corpses and prevent further miasmatic pollution of the air, which was believed to spread the disease, deep pits were dug in underground chambers or at the edges of quarry tunnels. These were not acts of disrespect, but desperate public health measures to stave off an even greater catastrophe. The underground, in this context, became a place of last resort, a stark utility for managing the unmanageable. During times of conventional warfare, the function of these spaces shifted from plague management to pure survival for those most vulnerable. When an army laid siege to a city, or when raiding parties stormed through the countryside, the fighting was the domain of soldiers. But the non-combatants, the elderly, the children, the mothers needed a place to wait out the storm. Prepared caverns, like the extensive sandstone caves in Nottingham, England, became entire subterranean villages. These were not merely holes in the ground. They were equipped with ingenious features for long-term habitation. Wells were dug to provide a fresh water supply independent of surface sources that could be poisoned or cut off. Narrow ventilation shafts, cleverly disguised among surface rocks or vegetation, provided a constant flow of air and prevented suffocation. Niches were carved into walls to serve as sleeping areas. Cooking hearths were built with channels to vent smoke away discreetly, and even small chapels were established to offer spiritual solace during the terrifying ordeal. A community could live here for weeks, hearing the muffled sounds of battle above, sustained by stockpiled food and the safety of the earth. Perhaps the most fascinating and overlooked role of the underground during crises was its function as a seat of emergency governance. Continuity of power was essential to prevent a descent into total anarchy. If a city hall was vulnerable to bombardment or a castle keep was on the verge of being overrun, where could the leadership go to remain functional? The answer often was down. There are historical accounts and architectural evidence suggesting that certain fortified tunnels and larger chambers beneath civic centers were designed to serve as emergency command posts. A mayor, a council of elders, or a military commander could relocate their operations underground, surrounded by maps and messages, directing the defense of the city or managing the distribution of scarce resources. Messengers could arrive and depart through various hidden exits, maintaining a flow of information while the leaders themselves remained secure. This meant that even if the symbols of power above ground, the banners, the great halls, fell into enemy hands, the actual apparatus of decision-making and authority remained intact, hidden and protected. It was the ultimate contingency plan, ensuring that society's command structure could not be decapitated by a single blow. This multifaceted role transforms our understanding of the medieval underground from a simple shelter into something far more profound, a societal backup system. Just as we today back up our most vital digital data to protect it from a crash, medieval communities invested in these subterranean spaces to back up their most vital assets, their people, their supplies, their leadership, and their social order. When the surface world became a lethal landscape of disease, fire, or steel, life and civilization could retreat into the darkness, pausing, waiting, and preserving itself until it was safe to emerge and begin again. This incredible resilience, baked into the very foundations of their cities, ensured that communities could endure shocks that would have otherwise erased them from history. The darkness below was not a place of fear, but a guarantee of future light, a hidden cradle that kept the flame of civilization alive through the longest and coldest of nights. To achieve this, they turned to a tool that was more commonly associated with charting the heavens than the underworld, the astrolabe. By adapting this astronomical instrument, surveyors could take precise measurements of angles and elevations from the surface, plotting the theoretical path of a tunnel with remarkable accuracy before a single shovel struck Earth. For ensuring a perfectly level gradient, especially critical for water channels like aqueducts or drainage tunnels that relied on gravity, builders used aqueducts. This was a long, wooden bench with legs and a groove down the middle that could be filled with water to act as a level. If the water touched both ends of the groove, the aqueduct was perfectly horizontal. With these tools, a master builder could stand at the entrance of a planned tunnel and direct his crew to dig in a straight line for hundreds of feet, confident that they would emerge exactly at the intended exit point, a feat that seems incredible even by today's standards. The materials they used were just as ingenious as their methods. In the constant damp of the underground, ordinary mortar would simply wash away or crumble, so they developed exceptionally durable and waterproof versions using lime. This wasn't just simple lime mortar, it was often mixed with volcanic ash, crushed pottery, or other pozzolanic materials that would cause it to set even underwater, creating a seal as hard as the surrounding rock. This was absolutely essential for lining cisterns to hold drinking water or for sealing tunnels that passed through waterlogged ground. And for the all-important entrances and exits, the goal was not just strength but absolute secrecy. Builders became masters of camouflage, crafting doorways that looked like part of a natural rock formation, or designing pivoting bookcases and hearths that swung open on counterweights. Their seams invisible to anyone who didn't know the precise mechanism to trigger them. The entrance to a secret passage wasn't just a door, It was a piece of deception, a magic trick woven into the very architecture of a building. This marriage of sophisticated engineering and clever deception reveals a profound truth about medieval mindset. These builders were not crude diggers. They were visionary problem solvers who understood physics, geology, and geometry. They looked at a challenge like digging a stable tunnel through soft soil and adapted the same rib vaulting and flying buttress techniques that allowed cathedrals to soar, using stone ribs to distribute the immense weight of the earth overhead and prevent catastrophic collapse. They were masters of their environment, using its properties to their advantage: the natural coolness for storage, the acoustic qualities of certain tunnels for communication, the compressive strength of bedrock for support. The underground spaces they created were marvels of durability. Many are still perfectly intact today, not as crumbling ruins but as fully functional passages and chambers, a testament to the sheer quality of their workmanship. They built for the ages, crafting a hidden world that was every bit as complex, as ambitious, and as awe-inspiring as the one they built in the light. While the hidden passages of castles and the sacred silence of crypts served the powerful, there was another, far more visceral underworld that literally laid the foundation for empire: the mines. These were not mere tunnels, they were arteries pumping the lifeblood of wealth directly from the earth itself, fueling the ambitions of kings and the economies of nations. The quest for precious resources drove medieval engineers to plunge deeper into the darkness than ever before, not to hide or to worship, but to extract the very materials that built and bankrolled the world above. Nothing illustrates this brutal alchemy of earth and power better than the silver mines of Kutná-Hora in Bohemia. In the 13th century, the discovery of incredibly rich silver veins there transformed a sleepy region into the financial heart of the Holy Roman Empire. This was not a simple hole in the ground. It was a sprawling, multi-level subterranean city of industry, complete with its own workshops, chapels, and a complex network of drainage adits to keep the groundwater at bay. The sheer scale of the operation was breathtaking. At its peak, Kutná-Hora produced an astonishing amount of silver, so much that it allowed King Wenceslaus II to centralize coin minting and issue the famous proggroschen, a currency that would dominate European trade for centuries. The wealth from these dark, cramped tunnels paid for armies, built magnificent Gothic cathedrals, and filled royal treasuries, proving that true power could be forged in the deepest, most lightless places. Yet, for all the glitter of silver, there was another mined substance that was arguably more fundamental to medieval life: salt. So vital was it for preserving food, the only method to prevent spoilage before refrigeration, that it was often called white gold. The Wieliczka salt mine in Poland is perhaps the most spectacular example. This was not just a mine, it was an underground testament to human endeavor, a labyrinthine world carved over centuries that stretched for hundreds of miles and delved hundreds of feet deep. Within its depths, miners, who were among the most skilled and highly paid workers of the era, carved everything from functional chapels to intricate statues out of the rock salt itself. The revenue from Wieliczka alone funded large portions of the Polish royal budget, underwriting the state's military and administrative power. Controlling a salt mine was like controlling a river of gold. It guaranteed a constant, indispensable stream of income that was immune to the failures of harvest or the fortunes of war. The sheer physical challenge of these operations demanded engineering brilliance that rivaled the construction of any cathedral. Ventilation was a constant, deadly serious puzzle. To bring fresh air to miners working far from the surface, they built elaborate systems of connecting shafts with carefully designed fires at their base. The heat from these fires would draw the stale, often toxic air up and out, pulling fresh air down through the main tunnels in a continuous, life-sustaining cycle. Transportation was another nightmare solved underground. They devised clever rail systems using wooden tracks and carts, and complex lifting mechanisms powered by giant horse-driven treadwheels to hoist tons of ore and rock to the surface. The most skilled practitioners of this dark art formed powerful guilds, who guarded their hard-won geological knowledge and extraction techniques as closely as any state secret. Their expertise made them invaluable, granting them privileges and a unique form of social power rooted in their mastery of the underground. This direct extraction of wealth from the earth fundamentally reshaped medieval economics and politics. A king who controlled a major mine controlled the means to mint coins, essentially controlling the economy itself. This wealth allowed monarchs to professionalize their armies, moving away from unreliable feudal levies and toward paid, loyal standing troops. It financed the intricate diplomacy of alliances and dowries. It built the palaces and courts that projected royal majesty and attracted the finest artists and scholars of the age. The competition for these resources ignited conflicts and forged alliances, drawing maps of power that were dictated by subterranean geology. The medieval economy, therefore, was not just built on the surface through trade and agriculture. It was quite literally underpinned by the immense, hidden value wrestled from the deep, dark earth by the strength and ingenuity of its miners. But the profound secrecy of the underground wasn't just a shield for the vulnerable. It also offered the perfect sanctuary for those who chose secrecy, for groups whose very existence was a challenge to the established order. This hidden world became the natural home for secret societies and ritualistic orders, transforming cold, dark chambers into crucibles where alternative loyalties were forged and revolutionary ideas could simmer away from the light of scrutiny. For these groups, the act of descending wasn't about survival. It was a powerful symbol of leaving the ordinary world behind and entering a realm of exclusive knowledge and sacred commitment. Consider the legendary Knights Templar. While their public face was one of pious warrior monks protecting pilgrims, their private rituals were shrouded in mystery, and much of that mystery unfolded in subterranean spaces. The crypts beneath their preceptories, like the one at Temple Church in London, were not just burial vaults, they were theaters for initiation ceremonies. In these torch-lit chambers, far from prying eyes, new recruits would be brought into the inner circle of the order, swearing oaths of absolute loyalty and poverty. The very environment, the weight of the earth above, the silence broken only by ritual chanting, was designed to heighten the sense of gravitas and separation from the secular world. This wasn't mere pageantry. It was a psychological tool to bind men together with an unbreakable sense of brotherhood and purpose, a purpose that eventually amassed them incredible wealth and political influence that threatened kings. For groups deemed heretical by the powerful medieval church, the underground was not a choice but a necessity for existence. The Cathars of southern France, who held dualist beliefs that directly contradicted Catholic doctrine, were hounded into hiding by the Albigensian Crusade. In response, they retreated into a network of natural caves and fortified grottos in the remote foothills of the Pyrenees, most famously the spectacular cavern system at Lombrives. Within these vast, cathedral-like spaces, they established entire underground villages where they could practice their faith, ordain their own ministers, and preserve their teachings. The act of worshipping in a cave was deeply symbolic. It represented a return to the purity of the early Christians who also hid in catacombs, a stark contrast to the perceived corruption of the ornate surface world church. Their hidden temples were both a practical refuge and a powerful statement of spiritual resistance. This function as a preserver of forbidden knowledge extended beyond religion into the realm of the esoteric and the philosophical. The intricate tunnels and chambers said to lie beneath Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland have long been associated with the Knights Templar and later Masonic traditions. Whether myth or reality, the stories themselves are telling. They speak of a place where ancient wisdom, perhaps brought back from the Crusades, could be protected, studied, and passed down through generations of initiates. In a time when certain ideas could be condemned as witchcraft or heresy, the underground provided a safe haven for intellectual traditions that fell outside approved doctrine. It became a library for dangerous ideas and a laboratory for spiritual practices that challenged the mainstream, ensuring that lines of thought suppressed on the surface could continue to develop in the depths. The political dimension of these secret gatherings cannot be overstated. When a group meets in absolute secrecy, their discussions inevitably turn from spiritual matters to worldly plans. A hidden chamber is a perfect place to plot resistance against an oppressive lord, to coordinate the activities of a dissident movement, or to form alliances that would be impossible in the open. The safety of the underground gave heretical sects and clandestine orders the breathing room to not just dream of a different world, but to actively organize to bring it about. They could stockpile weapons, hide printed pamphlets, and coordinate with sympathizers in other regions through discreet messengers, all under the cloak of darkness. This turned the subterranean landscape into a genuine incubator for alternative power structures, a place where the blueprint for a new social order could be drawn up, safe from the watchful eyes of the authorities who sought to maintain the old one. The very existence of these spaces was a testament to a simple, powerful truth, that authority is always contested, and that the most dangerous challenges to it are often those that are cultivated in the deepest shadows. While the glitter of silver and salt built palaces and paid armies, a far more fundamental form of power was being cultivated in the dark, fertile silence beneath the fields. In the precarious world of medieval agriculture, where a single failed harvest could spell starvation for thousands and rebellion against a lord, the ability to control the food supply was the ultimate source of dominance. This control wasn't just about what was grown on the surface under the sun. It was increasingly dependent on the revolutionary innovations happening underground, where the earth itself was harnessed to defy the seasons and turn scarcity into a weapon. The most widespread and essential of these innovations was the humble root cellar. To our modern eyes, it might seem like a simple hole in the ground, but for a medieval household, it was a lifeline. This was a masterpiece of passive climate control, engineered through simple, brilliant principles. Dug deep enough to be below the frost line, these subterranean chambers maintained a constant, cool temperature year-round, perfectly suited for storing the autumn harvest. The thick earth walls provided superb insulation, while careful ventilation through narrow, covered shafts allowed just enough air circulation to prevent mold and rot without letting in freezing winter air or scorching summer heat. Within this stable environment, barrels of apples and pears, sacks of carrots and turnips, and strings of onions could remain edible for months. This wasn't merely convenient. It was the difference between life and death during the long, lean months of winter and early spring, transforming a 2-month harvest season into a year-round food supply. But medieval ingenuity didn't stop at simple storage. In regions with unique geological features, they discovered that the underground could be used not just to preserve food, but to actively grow it out of season. In the sun-baked region of Andalusia in Spain, farmers discovered that certain caves maintained not just a cool temperature, but also a very specific, humid microclimate. They began using these spaces as subterranean gardens, cultivating delicate crops that would wither in the extreme heat above ground. The most famous of these were mushrooms, which thrived in the dark, damp conditions, providing a valuable source of protein even when the fields outside were barren. Herbs like coriander and parsley could also be coaxed to grow in these environments, adding crucial flavor and nutrients to a winter diet that was otherwise bland and limited. This was a form of early controlled environment agriculture, using the natural properties of the earth to create a perpetual spring underground, regardless of the weather on the surface. Perhaps the most breathtaking feat of underground agricultural engineering, however, was the management of water itself. In arid lands where surface rivers were seasonal or non-existent, communities devised incredible systems to tap into distant groundwater and bring it to their fields through gravity alone. The Katara system of Morocco, a technique learned from ancient Persian Qanats, is a stunning example. Teams of skilled diggers would first identify a water source at the foot of a mountain. From there, they would begin carving a gently sloping underground tunnel, sometimes stretching for dozens of miles, toward the arid plains where crops were to be grown. Vertical shafts were dug at regular intervals along the tunnel's route to provide access for excavation and, crucially, for ventilation and maintenance. This wasn't a mere ditch. It was a precisely engineered aquatic highway that prevented the massive evaporation that would have occurred in an open canal under the desert sun. The Katara delivered a steady, reliable trickle of life, giving water directly to the roots of date palms, olive trees, and grain fields, transforming barren landscapes into flourishing green oases and allowing entire communities to thrive in some of the most inhospitable climates on Earth. This mastery over the food supply inevitably became a central pillar of political power. For the ruling elite, a surplus of grain wasn't just a buffer against famine, it was a currency more reliable than gold. A lord with vast, cool, underground granaries stuffed with wheat and barley held the ultimate bargaining chip. He could use this hoarded surplus to reward loyalty, feeding the households of knights who served him faithfully. Conversely, he could withhold it from communities that defied his rule, using the threat of starvation to crush dissent before it even began. In times of revolt, a well-supplied castle could withstand a siege almost indefinitely, while the rebels outside would eventually have to scatter to forage for food. This control transformed food from a basic necessity into a sophisticated tool of social and political manipulation, ensuring that the greatest power resided not with the one who owned the most land, but with the one who could most effectively store and distribute what that land produced. The deepest roots of medieval dominance, therefore, were not found in a crown or a scepter, but in the dark, quiet, and abundantly stocked cellars buried deep beneath the earth. Beneath the grand halls where lords dispensed public justice echoed a far more chilling and private system of punishment, a judicial underworld where the very architecture was designed to inflict despair. While the dungeon has become a pop culture cliché, the reality was a calculated science of psychological torment. It wasn't just about locking someone away, it was about making them disappear from the world, both physically and mentally. The most infamous instrument of this vanishing act was the oubliette, a word derived from the French oublier, meaning to forget. This was not a cell with a door, but a bottle-shaped pit, often accessible only through a narrow grille in the ceiling of a larger dungeon. Prisoners were lowered into this lightless, often slime-coated shaft, with no room to stand or lie down, and then literally forgotten. The only reminders of their existence were the occasional scraps of food dropped down to them and the distant, echoing sounds of life from the world above, a cruel auditory torment that emphasized their complete and utter isolation. This was punishment stripped of all ceremony, a silent and efficient disposal that required no public trial and left no messy evidence. This power to make someone vanish was a potent political tool, and nowhere was it more famously wielded than within the thick walls of the Bastille in Paris. While it later became a symbol of royal tyranny, its original purpose was as a state prison for those who posed a special threat to the crown nobles involved in treasonous plots, writers producing seditious pamphlets, or individuals who simply knew too many court secrets. Incarceration here was often not the result of a public verdict but a lettre de cachet, a sealed letter from the king authorizing imprisonment without trial and without a stated term. The psychological genius of this system was its arbitrariness and its secrecy. A person could be dining with their family one evening and be in a cold, solitary cell by morning, with no one outside knowing their fate. The uncertainty was a torture in itself, breaking the spirit far more effectively than any physical device. The Bastille's dungeons were a stark, physical manifestation of the king's absolute power, demonstrating that his authority reached into the darkest corners of the kingdom, both above and below ground. For the most sensitive cases, the entire judicial process itself was driven underground, into hidden chambers where justice could be severed from public scrutiny. Certain tunnels and vaults, particularly those beneath castles or monasteries, were repurposed as secret courts for trying cases of high treason or heresy. These were not affairs of public record. A select panel of judges, often hooded or shadowed, would interrogate the accused in a room lit by a single torch, the proceedings muffled by thick stone walls. The rationale was twofold. First, to prevent the spread of seditious ideas that might be aired in a public trial, and second, to avoid inciting public sympathy or unrest for a popular figure who was being eliminated for political reasons. In these clandestine tribunals, the rules of evidence were often suspended, and confessions were extracted under duress, their validity irrelevant next to the predetermined outcome. This hidden justice system was the ultimate expression of power, proving that the law itself could be bent and twisted in the shadows to serve the needs of those in control. Yet the true horror of these spaces was often their chilling mundanity. The dungeons of places like Warwick Castle in England were not always dripping medieval horrors. Some were simply repurposed storage cellars, their sturdy, vaulted ceilings and thick walls making them ideal for confinement. This very normalcy made them all the more effective. A prisoner might be held in a space that once held barrels of ale or sacks of grain, a constant reminder of the everyday world that continued on without them. The darkness was near total, broken only by a sliver of light from a high, barred window, if one existed at all. The air was thick with the damp chill of the earth, a cold that seeped into the bones and never left. Time became meaningless, measured only by the delivery of meager meals. This sensory deprivation, the absence of light, sound, and human contact, was a form of psychological warfare that could reduce the strongest will to a state of apathetic brokenness, making a prisoner pliable for confession or simply erasing their identity altogether. These chambers were not just prisons, they were factories for manufacturing despair, proving that in the medieval world, the greatest power was not just the power to take a life, but the power to make a life not worth living. Yet even in a world defined by defense, faith, and toil, the medieval spirit craved release and revelry. Far from the grim dungeons and silent crypts, a different kind of energy pulsed through the underground, one of laughter, clinking tankards, and the shared thrill of a dice roll. These hidden spaces weren't just for survival, they were the period's most vibrant social clubs, offering a rare chance to shed the rigid formalities of surface life and simply be human. In the warm, smoky glow of a cellar tavern, the strict hierarchies of feudal society could momentarily soften, allowing for a camaraderie that was often impossible in the sunlit world above. The most common of these subterranean escapes was the humble cellar tavern, a fixture in cities from London to Prague. Tucked beneath a butcher's shop or a merchant's house, these establishments were more than just places to drink. They were the beating heart of community gossip, news exchange, and political debate. The thick, earth-insulated walls had a wonderful acoustic effect. They kept the boisterous noise contained from the street above, while also making it difficult for any one conversation to be easily overheard by the wrong ears. This created a uniquely trusted environment. Here, a common carpenter could grumble about the price of bread without fear of being reported to the guildmaster, or a disgruntled soldier might share doubts about his lord's latest campaign. Often, these cellars doubled as illicit gaming halls, with patrons wagering on dice games like hazard or playing early forms of cards. The combination of ale, anonymity, and the thrill of chance made these spaces a potent release valve for the immense social pressures of medieval life. For those with a taste for more sophisticated entertainment, the underground also offered hidden theaters. In an era where public plays were subject to strict censorship by both church and crown, subversive playwrights and actors took their performances underground, sometimes quite literally. Disused storage cellars, spacious monastic vaults, or even natural caverns on the outskirts of a town could be transformed into intimate performance spaces. Here, troops could stage satires that mocked the follies of the local nobility or explored risque topics that would never be permitted on a public stage. The very act of descending into the darkness to see a play added a layer of excitement and exclusivity. The audience was complicit in the secrecy, bound together by the shared experience of something forbidden. This clandestine culture wasn't just about rebellion. It was a vital arena for social commentary, a place where the anxieties and absurdities of daily life could be reflected upon and laughed at, providing a crucial psychological outlet for all levels of society. The wealthy and noble classes were no less drawn to the allure of concealed leisure, though their pursuits were often more refined. Many great castles and manor houses featured private gaming rooms in their lower levels, far from the prying eyes of servants or uninvited guests. In these lavishly appointed but discreet chambers, nobles could engage in high-stakes wagering on chess matches, backgammon, or early forms of billiards without risking their reputation for piety or prudence. A significant debt lost at the tables could be kept secret, avoiding public scandal. These private halls were also venues for intimate musical performances, poetry readings, and other entertainments that might have been deemed too informal or too personal for the great hall above. In this way, the underground provided the elite with something incredibly precious: privacy. It was a space where they could momentarily set aside the immense burden of their public personas and simply enjoy themselves. Ultimately, these spaces of entertainment reveal a universal truth about the human experience, even in the Middle Ages. No matter how harsh, regulated, or dangerous life may be, people will always carve out spaces for joy, connection, and a bit of mischief. The underground taverns, theaters, and gaming halls were not an escape from society, but an essential part of it. They provided the necessary counterbalance to the rigidity and piety of public life, allowing for the expression of ideas and emotions that had no other outlet. This vibrant social world beneath the streets proves that the medieval city was not just a fortress or a marketplace. It was a living, breathing community whose full, rich life could only be found by looking, or rather descending, beneath the surface. Far from being blank and barren, the walls of the medieval underground served as a profound canvas for the human spirit, a place where art wasn't just decoration but a vital language of power, faith, and identity. In the profound silence of a crypt beneath a cathedral's echoing nave, the stone wasn't left bare. Instead, it blossomed with vibrant frescoes depicting scenes from the lives of saints and martyrs. These weren't merely for beauty, They were a form of spiritual instruction and psychological reinforcement. For a pilgrim who had traveled for weeks to venerate a relic, the final descent into the dimly lit crypt was the culmination of their journey. As they moved through this subterranean sanctuary, the walls themselves would seem to come alive with stories of sacrifice and divine glory, heightening their sense of awe and confirming the sacred power of the place. This art served the authority of the church, visually arguing for its divine right to rule and inspiring the donations that fueled its earthly empire. In stark contrast to these sanctioned masterpieces was the raw, desperate art of the imprisoned, scratched into the soft stone of dungeon walls or carefully drawn with a bit of charcoal smuggled past a guard. The graffiti of prisoners tells a completely different story. These were not grand narratives of faith, but intimate expressions of individual despair, defiance, and hope. You might find a carefully etched calendar, marking the endless, meaningless passage of days in a lightless cell. Elsewhere, a crude drawing of a hanged man could represent a condemned cellmate, or perhaps a bitter curse against a cruel jailer. Some inscriptions are prayers, a final plea to a god who seemed to have abandoned them. Others are names, a simple, powerful assertion of identity. I was here, from someone the world above was trying to erase. This illicit art transforms a place of punishment into an archive of resistance, proving that even in the deepest darkness, the human need to express itself, to be remembered, could not be extinguished. Perhaps the most haunting fusion of art and the underground is found in the Capuchin catacombs of Palermo, where the concept of decoration is taken to a macabre and mesmerizing extreme. Starting in the 16th century, the monks of this Sicilian monastery developed a unique method of preserving and displaying the bodies of the local elite, from nobles and merchants to respected professionals and even young children. The result is not a hidden ossuary but a meticulously arranged gallery of the dead. Bodies are dressed in their finest period clothing and arranged in thematic corridors, a hallway for monks, one for virgins, another for lawyers and doctors. They hang on walls or lie on shelves, their desiccated features frozen in time. This practice, which continued for centuries, transcends mere burial. It becomes a chilling form of portraiture and social theater. For the living who visited, it was a stark, unforgettable memento mori, a reminder that wealth, status, and earthly beauty are all fleeting, and that death is the ultimate equalizer. The catacombs were a powerful piece of psychological and religious art designed to provoke piety by confronting viewers with their own inevitable fate. Beyond these grand examples, the underground was also a space for more personal and communal symbolism. In the tunnels beneath a castle, a knight might carve his family's coat of arms into a secret passageway, not just to mark his contribution to its construction, but to assert his lineage's role in the castle's defense. In the hidden prayer rooms of persecuted communities, simple symbols drawn on the wall, a star, a fish, a particular geometric pattern, could serve as a coded sign of welcome and safety for those in the know, while remaining invisible to outsiders. These acts of marking transformed impersonal, functional spaces into places imbued with personal meaning and collective identity. They turned the anonymous earth into a testament to the people who moved through it, a visual anchor for their stories, their beliefs, and their struggles. This rich iconography, from the divinely inspired to the desperately human, ensures that the medieval underground is not a silent, empty relic, but a space that still speaks to us across the centuries, offering a uniquely unfiltered glimpse into the minds and hearts of those who sought refuge, meaning, and expression in the world below. The very structure of the medieval city beneath the city was a physical map of its social order, a stark reflection of who held power and who was meant to remain unseen. For the elite, the nobility, the high-ranking clergy, the wealthiest merchants, the underground was a realm of privilege and strategic advantage. They commanded the construction of private escape tunnels that led from castle chambers to distant forests, ensuring their safety while common soldiers fought and died above. They enjoyed wine cellars and ice houses, cool luxuries that preserved their fine foods and drink, turning the Earth's natural properties into a testament to their refined status. Their access was exclusive, often guarded by hidden mechanisms known only to a trusted few, reinforcing the idea that the right to move unseen was a hallmark of true power. This control wasn't just about convenience, it was a powerful symbol of their separateness, their ability to operate on a different plane of existence from the masses they ruled. For the vast majority of people, however, the underground was a space of necessity and labor, not luxury. The lower classes, serfs, artisans, servants, interacted with the subterranean world through their work. They were the ones descending into the damp, dark cellars to draw beer from the casks, to store root vegetables for the winter, or to work in the tanning pits and brewing rooms that were kept underground to contain their foul odors and fire risks. Women, in particular, were intimately familiar with these spaces as an extension of their domestic sphere. The cellar was where they managed the household's crucial food preservation, where they might do the laundry in a dedicated washroom, or where they could seek shelter with their children during an attack. Their experience of the underground was defined by duty and survival, a stark contrast to the discretionary and often secretive use by their social superiors. Yet, in a fascinating twist, this landscape of control could also become a terrain of quiet subversion and unexpected empowerment. The very secrecy that made the underground valuable to the elite could also be turned against them. A serf might carve out a small, hidden compartment beneath the floor of their hut to store a portion of grain away from the tax collector or the landlord's steward. This act, though small, was a direct challenge to the economic order, a way of carving out a sliver of autonomy within a rigid system of extraction. The underground provided a rare opportunity to withhold, to keep a secret, to possess something that the powers above knew nothing about. For women whose lives were often tightly circumscribed by public expectation, the seclusion of certain underground spaces could offer a unique form of agency. Female mystics and anchorites, seeking a life of intense prayer and spiritual devotion outside the formal structure of a convent, would sometimes retreat to natural caves or purpose-built cells. Here, in voluntary isolation, they could develop a profound personal relationship with the divine, free from the interference of male clergy. Their seclusion often enhanced rather than diminished their spiritual authority. Their advice might be sought by powerful figures, and their visions could carry significant weight. In this way, the underground provided a platform for influence that was otherwise difficult for women to achieve in the medieval world. The ownership of subterranean space was therefore never absolute. It was a constant, subtle negotiation. A lord might own the deed to the land and everything above and below it, but his control was imperfect. He could not always see what was hidden in the root cellar, nor could he easily monitor the conversations in a cellar tavern where dissent might be brewing. The guild of miners who maintained the critical ventilation shafts in a silver mine held a form of power through their indispensable knowledge, a leverage they could use to negotiate better pay or conditions. The underground, by its very nature, resisted total mastery. It was a contested frontier where the official hierarchies of the surface world were both reinforced and, in fleeting but important ways, challenged, proving that even in the deepest shadows, the human desire for autonomy could find a way to persist. Maintaining these sprawling subterranean worlds was a never-ending battle against the relentless pressure of the earth itself. Imagine the constant, hidden labor required to keep a secret tunnel from collapsing, a cistern from leaking, or a mine shaft from flooding. This wasn't a task for occasional repairs. It was a continuous, demanding cycle of inspection, clearing, and reinforcement. Teams of specialized workers, organized into powerful guilds of miners, sappers, and masons, descended into the darkness daily. Their work was shrouded in secrecy, not just to protect the strategic value of the passages, but to safeguard the ingenious engineering techniques they employed. These guilds guarded their knowledge as closely as a state secret, passing down sophisticated methods for shoring up soft soil with timber braces, repairing intricate vaulting, and detecting the faintest sounds of shifting rock that signaled an impending collapse. The silence of the underground was punctuated by the scrape of shovels clearing silt from drainage channels, and the tap of masons' hammers resetting stones dislodged by frost or vibration from the city above. The expansion of these networks was an even more formidable undertaking, a testament to medieval long-term vision. As a city's population grew and its needs evolved, so too did its hidden footprint. New tunnels were painstakingly dug to connect emerging neighborhoods to water sources, or to create additional storage for a booming trade. The Paris catacombs stand as the ultimate example of this centuries-long ambition. What began as ancient limestone quarries providing the very stone that built the city above, gradually transformed into something entirely different. As Paris's cemeteries overflowed in the 18th century, the abandoned quarries were repurposed into a vast, organized ossuary. For years, every night, a solemn procession of carts would carry the bones of millions of Parisians from their previous resting places into this new, subterranean city of the dead. This was not a haphazard dumping ground. It was a meticulously organized project, with walls of carefully stacked femurs and skulls creating a macabre and orderly architecture. This ongoing, multi-generational project shows a remarkable capacity for adaptive reuse, continuously reimagining the underground to solve the pressing problems of the world above. This incredible investment of labor and resources reveals a sophisticated medieval understanding of infrastructure. Those in power recognized that the strength and resilience of their visible domains, the castles, the cathedrals, the market squares, were utterly dependent on the health of the unseen world below. A collapsed tunnel could cut off a vital water supply or a crucial escape route. A neglected mine shaft could flood, destroying a primary source of wealth. Maintaining these systems was a non-negotiable cost of doing business, an insurance policy paid in sweat and stone. It was a form of long-term thinking that is deeply impressive, a commitment to building and maintaining frameworks that would serve not just the current generation, but their grandchildren and beyond. They were investing in the very foundations of their power, ensuring that their legacy, quite literally, had deep roots. This hidden, continuous effort is a powerful reminder that history is not just about the grand events we see on the surface, but about the silent, sustained work that makes those events possible. Today, the silent, stone-lined corridors that once safeguarded medieval secrets are speaking to us once more, not through whispers of conspirators, but through the careful trowels and laser scanners of modern archaeologists. This isn't just a process of rediscovery, it's a profound act of resurrection, bringing these hidden worlds back into the light of understanding and transforming them from forgotten voids into vibrant portals to the past. Every layer of soil carefully removed, every artifact meticulously catalogued, adds a new sentence to a story we thought was lost. The work is painstaking and often happens away from the public eye, but its revelations are nothing short of spectacular. Through techniques like ground-penetrating radar and three-dimensional digital mapping, we can now explore these spaces without ever disturbing a single stone, creating perfect virtual replicas that allow us to walk through history from anywhere in the world. This scientific scrutiny confirms some long-held legends while completely upending others, proving that the true history of the medieval city is not just written on parchment, but is carved into the very earth beneath our feet. This archaeological renaissance has turned these once secret spaces into some of the world's most captivating tourist destinations, places where history is not just seen but felt. Visitors to the Edinburgh Vaults don't simply hear about 18th century urban life. They descend into its damp, cramped reality, feeling the chill of the stone and hearing the echoes of a past that suddenly feels immediate and tangible. In Cappadocia, Turkey, tourists can wander for miles through the mind-boggling complexity of Derinkuyu or Kaymakli, multi-level underground cities that housed thousands, complete with stables, churches, and intricate ventilation shafts. The experience is transformative. It moves history from an abstract concept in a textbook to a visceral, awe-inspiring reality. This surge in subterranean tourism does more than just boost local economies. It creates a global community of people fascinated by the ingenuity and resilience of our ancestors, fostering a deep, personal connection to a past that might otherwise seem remote and inaccessible. Beyond the thrill of exploration, these sites serve a crucial educational purpose, acting as open-air museums that challenge our modern assumptions. Walking through the cool, dark storage chambers of Orvieto's tufa caves, it becomes stunningly clear how medieval societies mastered sustainability long before the term was ever coined. They understood passive climate control, energy conservation, and resource management out of sheer necessity. This historical wisdom is now directly inspiring contemporary architects and urban planners facing the immense challenges of climate change and overpopulation. The principles behind the ancient Qanat systems, which brought water across arid landscapes without a single watt of electricity, are being studied for modern irrigation projects in drought-stricken regions. The concept of moving transit networks, utility lines, and even large-scale commercial storage underground to free up surface space for green areas and reduce urban heat islands is a direct echo of medieval multi-layered urban planning. Our ancestors weren't primitive, they were pioneers of resilient design, and their buried blueprints offer a treasure trove of sustainable solutions for our future. Perhaps the most profound lesson these spaces teach us is one of resilience in the face of uncertainty. In an era defined by global pandemics, climate volatility, and geopolitical instability, the medieval underground stands as a powerful testament to the human capacity to adapt and endure. These networks were the ultimate contingency plan, a physical manifestation of the foresight needed to survive profound disruption. They show us that resilience isn't about building higher walls, but about having deeper roots, about creating flexible, redundant systems that can ensure the continuity of community, economy, and culture when the surface world is in crisis. By studying how medieval communities used the earth to regulate temperature, store essential supplies, and ensure water security, we gain not just historical knowledge, but a practical toolkit for building more durable and adaptable societies today. The enduring legacy of the medieval underground is a reminder that true security comes not from dominating the landscape, but from working in harmony with it, and from preparing for the unknown with creativity, humility, and profound ingenuity. But perhaps the most unsettling lesson from the underground is its stark illumination of a timeless ethical dilemma, the price of survival and who is forced to pay it. The very resilience that allowed a medieval city to endure a siege was often built on a foundation of profound inequality. The cool, spacious wine cellars that preserved the fine vintages for the nobility were a world away from the damp, crowded caverns where the common folk huddled for safety. The secret tunnels that allowed a king to flee a losing battle were inaccessible to the soldiers and citizens left behind to face the conqueror's wrath. This forces us to ask a difficult question. Does the ability to endure a crisis justify the creation of systems that protect the powerful at the direct expense of the vulnerable? The medieval answer was often a pragmatic and brutal yes, but our modern reflection must grapple with the moral cost of that pragmatism. It holds up a dark mirror to our own world, where the existence of fortified bunkers for elites or secure data havens for the ultra-wealthy suggests that the impulse to create hidden safeguards for some, but not all, is a persistent feature of human society. The underground, in all its ingenious complexity, challenges us to define resilience not just as the capacity to survive, but as the commitment to ensure that survival is a shared endeavor, not a privileged escape. From the thunder of hooves on the battlefield to the quiet chants in a candlelit crypt, from the clink of coins in a merchant's vault to the desperate whispers of a besieged population, we've journeyed through the incredible hidden world that powered the medieval era. This exploration reveals a fundamental truth about power itself, that its most enduring forms are often invisible, built on a foundation of profound depth both in the physical earth and in human ingenuity. The grand cathedrals and imposing castles we so often associate with this period were merely the tip of the iceberg. Their true strength, their resilience, and their longevity were forged in the cool, dark silence below. This was a world of brilliant duality, where every display of authority above ground was underwritten by a network of secrets, supplies, and strategies hidden from view. These subterranean networks teach us that history is a multi-layered story, and to understand any era, we must be willing to dig deeper, to look beyond the obvious monuments and official records. The full narrative is found in the grain stored against a famine, the water channeled through a desert, the faith preserved against persecution, and the knowledge protected from destruction. It's a reminder that human civilization is as much about what we conceal and protect as it is about what we proudly display. The choices made in the shadows, where to dig a tunnel, what to hide in a cellar, who to shelter in a cave, often had a greater impact on the course of history than the decisions made in the sunlit halls of power. As we resurface from this journey into the depths, I hope it ignites a new way of seeing the world around you. The next time you walk through an old city, remember that the ground beneath your feet is not just dirt and rock. It is a historical archive, a silent witness to the ingenious, desperate, and visionary acts that shaped our present. May this exploration inspire your own curiosity to look closer, to question the surface, and to always wonder what stories are waiting just out of sight, buried in the layers of our shared past. If this deep dive into history's hidden layers captivated you, share your own thoughts and questions in the comments below. I love hearing what sparks your curiosity. For more journeys into the forgotten corners of our world, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss our next adventure. Thank you for watching, and may your own path of discovery always lead